the ground. You can tell he's picked this area to kind of stay away from humans who usually seem to panic when he gets near. You haven't seen that problem necessarily here, but then he already flipped out a little bit, so who knows what he's encountered. And
exactly.
So as he's kind of just putting deep grooves into the earth with his claws and kind of just kind of brooding, you come walking up, and right away he perks up and turns and kind of rolls over and then kind of stands and starts looking at you. And you approach up to within 20 feet or so, and he's just kind of staring at you, but not really doing anything.
Yeah, okay. Ymir approaches Wotek, locks eyes with him when he turns around and kind of perks up, raises his left hand direct and looks directly at Wotek and says, "Hold your tongue and sheathe your pride, brother, before you dishonor both of our ancestors, and listen." And then Ymir, breaking his walking, he continues to walk forward until he's about parallel with Wotek, and rests his hammer down on the ground next to him and sits and tucks his knees, and after he sits down he tucks his knees up almost like a child would when a child is upset, or when somebody is rocking back and forth at a ball. It's a very guarded, very protected stance, but he only does this because the weight on his soul is so heavy right now that he's got some things to say that Wotek needs to hear.
Okay. All right, and he kind of sits down and just kind of starts staring at you, but you notice he keeps kind of looking away. You could tell that all of the shit that he never included you in is definitely weighing on him, so.
Ymir leans forward and goes, "Brother, how could you? Since I left Jotunheimer, you have been the closest thing to a father that I have ever had. You and I have looked after each other for so many seasons, protected each other so many times. And you always told me, what's the one thing we could never do? Dishonor each other. Do you remember, Wotek? Do you remember my 10th season away? I was barely able to swing my hammer at that time. Do you remember what happened with..." And his voice trails off as he's literally fighting back tears on the inside thinking about this, even though he's been in such a, trying to right his mood so much. The trauma of this event is still very fresh in his mind. And his voice trails off and he goes, "The cubs, do you remember them?"
And he kind of closes his eyes and nods somberly.
"You, Wotek, came to me in a vision by this dark sorcerer of sorts, the kind that we never mingle with. And you, in my vision, told me about the winter of black flame, where your battle, your lust for battle, and your need to protect overcame you and became something dark and uncontrollable. Wotek, you were there for me during mine. Do you remember When we first came upon the group, their mothers slaughtered like dogs. No meat. The cubs slaughtered like dogs. No meat. No fur taken. No bones to be delivered to the earth. No respect for our realm. They took them away from life early, and they took their parents into servitude. And do you remember? You leaned on me and looked me in my eyes. Wondered if my nerves were still of steel and my axe hand wasn't shaking. And right then, I committed the blackest of sins that our people could do. Tal Vanak. And the words escape because these Talvanak, or a black word between shield brothers or sisters, is one of the biggest sins that one can commit within Vana society. I told you I was alright. I told you that I was ready and able to battle, but I lied. And do you remember what happened, Wotek? Do you remember that night when we slept? You slept, and I snuck away to that camp, and I put everyone to my blades. My axes gained their name that season, if you remember. I couldn't control myself. You caught me just before dawn, chewing on the leader of those monsters' face. Like an animal. Like a savage uncontrolled. But so, everyone else was dead. Civilians, the mother bears, everyone. But you held me down, thrashing as I might, as blood-crazed as any demon we've ever met. You held me down until I stopped. And what did you say? Never commit Talvanak with a shield brother. It took you years to forgive me, and for me to show my dedication to our cause. Now, given that all of what I have been shown by someone that I have been told my entire existence is our greatest enemy, why are they showing me the truth? Wotek, why? And his voice trails off even more.
Okay. Now, as you've been saying all of this, you see that his head has been hanging lower and lower the whole time. And as this has been happening, you also notice that his breathing has become more and more labored, like he's, going through a kind of emotional response. And although he doesn't use language, obviously, like the rest of you do, you and him have always had a really close, basically psychic kind of bond. And sorry, Here we go. And so as you've been speaking, you can tell that his mood has shifted from one of almost like embarrassment and kind of not really wanting to have this conversation to almost like sorrow. Like going through these different memories has kind of enhanced the shame that he already was feeling about withholding information about something so important. And as this increases, you start hearing him make like small low growls, and he starts kind of like lolling his head from one side to the other. And at one point he gets so agitated he even kind of snaps his jaws at the air a couple of times, and makes kind of like louder groans and kind of holds his head up a little more as it kind of bobs from one side to the other. And he's getting really, you could tell he's getting really upset. And as he's getting more and more upset, what you feel coming through your guys' kind of like bond is that he's thinking about the kind of more savage and bestial form that he had undergone previously during what we had discussed as the time of the Black Flame, and as these images kind of bounce over to you, as they overflow from him, you realize that it's not so much that this other form of his from the past frightened him, it's that he feels great guilt because he loved it. He loved fighting and mauling and ripping and grinding until his own body was broken, and then continuing on with shattered jaws and broken claws and hollow eye sockets and rent flesh and broken bones. Just the carnage that he was able to inflict and receive and endure and experience and enjoy, all of that madness was a kind of pleasure to him that was its own ecstasy beyond anything even a great and mighty spirit like him had been able to encounter in all of its long eons. And so that kind of savage and degenerate evil side feeling so good to him is abhorrent and really revealing about things about himself and your guys' culture that he never wanted to admit. And then you realize that he's also focusing on what happened when that mad side subsided, when the insanity subsided and the cold and calculating demonic force that he became truly emerged, where he had given himself over wholly to evil, not just to madness, okay? And as he's going through these, then you get this overwhelming sensation of regret, because his thoughts shift to your revered ancestor who had trusted him beyond all others, and how when this individual fell, ultimately it was Wotek's, previous incarnation which had really made that possible. And he projects to you a kind of guilt over knowing that kind of curse has carried forward to this day. And as he does, as you're picking this up, he kind of comes close, and you see him bow his head really, really low. And as he does so, he breathes out slowly onto one of his massive paws. And a chill, frosty wind exhales out from his lungs and onto his long curved claws. And as it does so, you see an actual frost appear and creep across the long curved blades. The frost quickly thickens and becomes almost solid ice encasing the claws. But there's a peculiar kind of emerald sheen to the ice. Now, as he does this, you start seeing small motes and arcs of green energy emanating from the claws on his right paw that he just coated. He slowly rears back, reaches into the air, and with his one set of claws, he swipes very gently towards your left wrist. Okay? As he does so, you see the air shimmer and part slightly, and as it does so, it almost rolls in on itself, and reveals something behind what you normally are able to see, almost like a hidden truth. And as this image solidifies for you, you realize that around your wrist and hanging from it, you indeed bear some kind of spectral shackle. And from that shackle hangs a great chain that you immediately recognize as the same as the image of Thorloff that you encountered before, only sized to your current scale. And as you see this image, you realize that it's only showing you, a foot or two of the chain hanging down. But instantly, as you see this and you recognize it, you realize that the chains extend off and behind you in the distance, further than you can even see. And you also get a very chilling realization sweep across you that this isn't the only one you bear. Indeed, your feet at the ankles and your other wrist, as well as your neck, bear one of these spectral shackles and chains, binding you to something far behind. As this realization comes over you, you start up and stand and actually spin in a almost panic, trying to reach out and grab these chains that appear to have been on you the entire time, looking for something to rend apart with your strength or smash with your mighty weapon. But as soon as you back up, you realize that the enchantment that allows you to see these has faded now, and again, you're just reaching at thin air. You see nothing and can feel nothing, but the panic is still very real. And with this, you spin back around to Wotek with eyes wide with shock, and you realize that his head is still hanging low, and he's simply sitting there in shame, because he essentially he's essentially letting you know that you have an entire volume of history that's been completely hidden from you, and that volume is dark as hell. It is, in fact, closer to call it a curse, and you're only now beginning to see the shape of things to come. Okay.
Ymir looks at Wotek after this revelation. Eyes still wide, heart still pounding a little bit, because given what he has just witnessed. But he looks at Wotek firmly and goes, "Brother, I know about him and the embers. We must find them. I must know."
Okay, and at this,
And
he rears his head back and lets out a deafening, shrieking growl in protest. Absolute, like, horrific, miserable protest. And after it's done, he, like, limply and weakly just kind of rolls his head back forward, knowing that there's no way you'll acquiesce to the protest, but knowing that he had to make it all the same.
what we face, we still face together, Wotek. Remember that. Kalvanok or not, you're still my brother. I still care for your being. I still respect the balance that we have fought so hard to protect. Going forward, you and I stand united once again. Any problems that we have from this day can be settled up at a different time. We must have answers. And as he says answers, that old voice that Ymir first got when the transformation just happened, that voice that isn't quite his own, that reverberates through the echoes of time and through his bloodline, it sounds like Thorloff when Ymir speaks.
Okay. And at this, he raises his head kind of in shock and disbelief and kind of stares at you for a minute. And he looks almost hopeful for a second, like he's searching for something. And then he kind of just deflates a bit and puts his head down. And he gives you just a slight nod of acquiescence and agrees. He agrees to go forth and try and face this with you, but you can tell it's like someone agreeing to something that they know is just suicide, just because there's no other answer than yes sometimes. So does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, hey, should we keep driving in the snowstorm and just see if we can make it, kind of thing, you know what I mean? So that's kind of that's the feeling you're getting, is that he's willing to follow you, but it's not because he thinks you guys are this is gonna end well, basically. You're getting the impression that he knows so much more than has been divulged to you, though. I mean, that seems absolutely clear at this point. So I just want to make sure to throw that out there.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Ymir scratches behind Wotek's ear, even though it might be a futile gesture. He still scratches behind Wotek's ear and lets him know, we leave tomorrow at sunrise, 8 a.m. There are stables, and I will make sure that the people that provided my room have some food sent out to you. The party, we will meet you at 8 a.m. tomorrow.
Okay. And he nods, and you can tell that he definitely is back on track with, trying to get moving with the tasks at hand, and is ready to set everything to the side. So
With that, Ymir makes his way back towards the room.
Okay. All right.
That's my destination anyway.
You head back to the room.
Our communal room, yes. And just wait, kind of in quiet contemplation. Ymir is being very still, very quiet, has his fingertips together, sort of just in deep contemplation with all that was said.
Okay. So do you want to meditate then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So you go ahead and again, for any kind of magic user or psionic user, meditation is as natural, if not more, than sleep. So it's something very easy to fall into and use to its full effect. So you go ahead and get yourself comfortable. You take care of a few small things, use the restroom, and just kind of
shower.
There you go. Get yourself cleaned up and all that kind of stuff. And once all of the minutiae is taken care of, you go ahead and start meditating. And very quickly, you start having something strange happen where you're starting to hear something interesting. And with that, we're going to switch over to Akama. Now, Akama, you had been in the store checking out some of the religious trinkets and baubles that they had on offer. Mm-hmm. And as you were looking around at all of this, you actually have someone tap on your shoulder. And as you turn around, you see that it's actually Harmony.
Okay.
Harmony is it's been a few hours since you guys saw her, and since that time she actually has obviously seen a healer and looks normal again. No more half crispy face and horrible radiation sickness lesions from
she don't look like this doll anymore.
No.
No,
not anymore.
All right, cool.
So, but she's looking good, and she's got herself all cleaned up and got full armaments and armor and everything going. But as she taps you on the shoulder and you turn around, she looks at you and says, I hope you're all finding the House of Saints facilities to your liking.
Before she says that, and I turn around, I give out like a big smile and then come in with a big hug.
All right, as you do this, you can tell it kind of shocks her, and she, at first just has her arms kind of out, sort of not knowing what to do, and then after a second, she kind of pats you on the back, and you kind of weren't sure where that would go, but she didn't, deck you or, flip out or anything, so
I was ready for it.
More familiar. So
I look at her and I say, "You look very amazing. Everything has been fixed from what I'm a loss for words. You look great. I'm glad that you are looking whole again."
All right, she nods and she says, I appreciate it. As she's talking to you, by the way, she pulls out one of those black cigarillos and starts lighting it up, one of those familiar ones from the beginning of your journey that have some interesting effects. And as she lights that up, she says, I appreciate it. She says it would be good for your group to remember this place. She says, the baths that you saw downstairs are some of the most renowned healing pools in this entire continent. She says they've even been rumored, with the assistance of other magics and practitioners, to be able to revive the recently deceased. When she says this, she blows out the match that she was using to light her cigarette, her cigar, and as she does so, she blows it out right as she flicks her eyes up and matches your gaze. The way she says that, right at that moment, and does that gesture, she doesn't say anything afterwards and just stares at you in the eyes. And just waits, just lets time pass as she starts puffing, and lets that really sink in. Okay?
I look at her, slightly puzzled, but at the same time, kind of wondering, when you say perished, how long until they're able to be, back on their feet? As far as in, from the time they are no longer with us, how much time would it take?
She says they would need to reach the pool in a matter of hours, not days. And it would be a matter of days before the pool was able to fully restore them.
Okay. And I give her like a quick thumbs up, and I'm like, sweet, thanks for the information.
Okay. She waits just a moment and is suspiciously quiet. She takes several more drags. And then while she's looking off into the sky, off to her right, apparently tracking a bird with her vision, she says, I've often wondered if the opposite would be true.
That's a wild thing to think of, but glad we had this conversation.
She says, just imagine it. What if something dead were brought to the pools and held under until it returned to life?
Anything and everything. I mean, with life, there's also death.
And she shakes her head and she says, I'm sorry, I'm not explaining the situation well. She says, in all of the hunting that I have done, I have encountered many things that possess the opposite of life force. The undead are good examples. She says, but out of all of these dead creatures that are still animated and still in a quasi-living form, she says, some are even more closely aligned with death than others. She says, an example would be a zombie as a baseline. She says, a zombie is a person who has had a form of curse enacted upon them, and now have a sense of unlife or quasi-life that keeps them animated through magics, although the spirit, the animating energy, is essentially gone. She says, and as we move up the scale, we come to other beings like the vampire, whose life force has been merged and supplanted by an alien force. She says, much like a virus that is animating a dead body, this is their nature. And she says, and then there are true incarnations of death among the living. She says, Take the Lich, for example. This being has a mastery over magic and life, and a passion and greed for knowledge so strong that it will prepare for death by ensuring that magics and rituals will transform it into a creature of death. She says, but through this process, they grow and change and transform into near godlike beings. She says, truly this creature is dead, and yet it shines with a kind of quasi-life. She says, I have wondered often, what if one of these kind of beings were to be held under the pool's healing powers long enough to truly reverse the effects that had taken them to their current form. And at this, she takes the last drag of the cigarillo, throws it down and crushes it out with her boot heel, and then kind of exaggeratedly and dramatically blows out the last large plume of smoke. And she says, "'Tis but a wonder. Perhaps would be good for you to wonder the same." And she just looks over at you and kind of winks, and then turns off towards what you've seen to be some kind of large exterior, almost chapel ruins that are up on a hill in the distance, up on this plateau that the temple complex is built on. She nods towards those kind of chapel ruins, and she says, occupy yourselves for another few hours, and as the sun, once the last rays of the sun have gone from the sky, and new darkness has fallen, she says, meet us up at yonder gate. She says, the event we spoke about shall take place then. At this, she nods and she spins quickly and begins walking away towards basically where the residences are. So
I say to myself, yuck, filthy vampires.
Excellent. All right, so let's see. Ymir, you heard something as you were meditating, and as you continue meditating, something snaps you out of it after a pretty decent amount of time. That sound that's kind of like a nagging itch as you're meditating that you can't quite place. At one point, you're able to get in a state where it becomes loud and clear, and what it actually is, when you can recognize it, is the loud clanging of chains coming from behind you. And as soon as you recognize it, you kind of start awake from your meditation. But we're gonna say that Akama has been looking through the shop for quite a while, through the shops, and that then the interaction took place just now with Harmony. So we're going to say that you've meditated. We're essentially going to move time forward a good chunk here, and we're going to say that you've gotten about 2 hours of meditation, and Akama, it's been about 2 hours total, a little over 2 hours, 2.5 hours. You're able now, as Harmony's walking away, to kind of decide wherever you want to head to. And Ymir, you're just kind of rousing yourself from your meditation. But you should be good. You should be good to reset your
PPE?
PPE, MDC. I don't think. I don't even think you had taken any damage, but yeah, you basically should be able to reset your ISP, PPE, and MDC.
I would like to look at the dwarf and ask if he has any statues or anything regarding dragons of myth.
He actually kind of frowns for a second, and he says, I don't think I've had anything come through of that sort lately. He says, give me just 1 second. And he heads out into a little alcove in the back of his shop and disappears around a corner. And he comes back out after a moment with a small wooden chest about the size of a loaf of bread. And he sets it on the countertop next to his register. And he turns it around towards you and unlatches a little brass clasp. And when he opens it up, you see that inside there is a really nice hair comb, or I'm sorry, not hair comb, what do you call it? A hairpin that has a beautifully etched dragon coiled around the upper kind of 1/3 of it. And at the end, the dragon has its claws kind of outstretched and bared, and its fangs bared in like a menacing kind of, threatening kind of visage. It's sitting in the kind of simple little chest, the little box, on a little piece of black satin and a like pillowed bottom. But it doesn't really look very expensive or very interesting or unique or, anything like that.
Okay.
It's just pretty basic is what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, thank you. I appreciate it. I was just looking around and I see that you have a bunch of beautiful arts around this parts, and I just wanted to see if you had any type of dragon like sculptures or anything that resembles a dragon. I was willing to pay a pretty penny, but if this is the only thing that you can produce, then I guess I'll be off.
He says, well, we do have this large piece here that is actually based on an ancient dragon cult. It's supposed to be an authentic replicant, or an authentic replication of one of their sacrificial altars. And he leads you over to one of the corners of his shop, and one of those larger pieces I was talking about that's basically like the size of a desk, it actually is basically like an altar. And you see there's all kinds of arcane designs all over its surface, but it's even got blood grooves all around the edges and throughout the rune work to enable, the flow of sacrificial blood. Now, again, in this setting, I can't stress enough that it is a very dark setting, and part of the tenets of magic in this is that all living creatures are kind of like a little mini magical battery, and that energy inside, that magical energy that everything possesses, can be used to fuel magic. So if a spellcaster wants to cast a really costly, energy-intensive spell, they're able to use the energy inside other living creatures. Now, usually you can't just suck it out, but one way to get around that is if you kill something, As soon as it dies and its energy is leaving its body, at that very instant, the energy leaving the little battery is actually doubled. And that explosive burst as it dies, that can be harnessed by almost any kind of magic user. It's a very, very simple skill that they all learn, and just kind of part of the physics of magic. So, throughout almost all kinds of magic workings and disciplines and stuff in this setting, there's gonna kind of be the possibility for evil individuals to kill something and use that sacrifice to really get a big boost and pay for the cost of the magic.
Got you.
So in that sense, you see that there is this sacrificial altar. You see that for the most part, it looks like it's an elven kind of... It almost looks more like an elven, like a harvest deity kind of representation. You're seeing a lot of natural motifs. You're seeing things very closely tied to nature. You're seeing where there would be positions for, for instance, the heart of a rabbit. There's an area for some mistletoe, almost kind of traditional druidic kind of components, things like that. So you're seeing a lot of that familiar kind of some, those symbols that pertain to that kind of discipline. But in the very center, there is a small raised spike that comes up from the central depression where the accumulation of blood happens, the kind of like the pool, if you will. And from that central spike coming up, you can actually see carved all across the spike, which is about the size of, like a cigarette, okay? And all along its exterior are carved small runes and etchings that you can tell right away from your familiarity with it are actually they pertain to what's known as the cult of the dragon, and that is or the cult of dragonkind, it's often called. From your experience, that is an incredibly evil organization. For the most part, it's a religion set up by evil dragons to entice mortals to basically worship them and do their bidding. And in that way, they don't really rise to deific levels of power because they're not really gods. But as dragons, there is a component where the more people that worship them and support them and stuff, it does enhance them. And so these really evil dragons for a long time now have been trying to basically build their own religion up. And they do some of the most apocalyptic, world-ending shit out there. You would not have guessed that this could be some kind of crazy artifact or really, really powerful, potent object at a glance at all. But after just looking at that central spike and knowing what it refers to, it makes you instantly not terrified, but incredibly cautious of this piece of artwork. So much so that you actually hold one hand out and take a step back when you realize what you're looking at. You immediately also notice that the spike itself it looks to be made of some kind of glass or crystal. You're not sure exactly which. Other than that, as you're looking at this thing, you're not really picking up much other information at all.
Okay. I guess when I first come upon it, I look at it and I'm like, oh wow, this is what I'm talking about. And I look at the dwarven shopkeeper and I give him quite a little bit of a bow. And then as I look into it more, I understand what this was about and give me kind of more of a distasteful situation, but I don't show the shopkeeper.
Okay.
I end up turning to him and I let him know, uh, I thank you for your time. I definitely will see what I can do. I'll come back and most likely purchase something. I just wanted to look around and see what you have in your wares. And other than that, I'll be on my leave.
Okay, he nods very respectfully and kind of eagerly, still hoping to secure a sale of some kind. And he hands you a small business card that just says Jim's Curios. And it's just a simple normal business card. And he hands it to you and he says, if you're interested in that piece, it's already been here a couple of months, and I don't expect it to sell anytime soon. He says, I might be able to cut you a really good price on it.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I'm guessing they don't have like cell phones, so I guess I'll send them like a
Oh, yeah.
postcard or something.
No, yeah, there's all kinds of ways. Yeah, you can, I mean, there's even spells. There will be shops that you can go into anywhere where it would be appropriate. Kind of think like an old telegraph thing in the Old West. So there'll be shops that'll do all these different kinds of things, and you could go in and have some kind of magical messenger do like a psionic communication or something like that. Have somebody receive it on the other end, back forth. There'll be all kinds of different shit that we could utilize to do that kind of stuff. Tons.
So it'll kind of be like Dragon Ball Z, where Goku touches Kami's back. Not Kami. One of the guys back, and he's able to telekinetically speak telepathically. Not telekinetically.
Yeah.
Telepathically speak to other people.
Yeah, there's even spells called like Magic Pigeon, where you recite a message and then the spell creates a magical pigeon with the note of your message attached to its leg, and it sort of flies there, but if you want, you can kind of fudge a little and just say after a while it kind of teleports. There's all kinds of ways to do it, but essentially it's like, it's like a fucking magical version of a, letter. And we can upscale and downscale that with all kinds of cool shit. In fact, that's something we've been talking about, is you guys getting some comms. And Kilo would be able to upgrade shit with all kinds of cool features. So, I mean, I would think anyway, with enough research. All right, so let's see. So he gives you the card, and Ymir, are you, now that you've kind of been roused and you're kind of up and around, are you wanting to go back into meditating or start heading out, or?
No, yeah. Ymir will get up after he kind of roused himself from the meditation, or had that experience that roused him from the meditation. He wants to be out of the room. He just wants to step out of his room for a second. Maybe he can see a comma and find out what to do next. He's just looking to get out of that space that he's currently in. So he steps outside and starts heading where he knew a comma might be within the vicinity, in order to meet up with him.
Okay. You start heading over to some of the areas with shops and stuff, and just kind of wandering around looking for him. The area, this whole place isn't very big, and as you're kind of wandering around, you guys come upon each other pretty quickly. You see him through the window of a shop, and you can't get inside because it's way too small, but as he steps outside, what would you guys like to say? I'm gonna say it's probably about, we're gonna move forward a little bit and just say it's probably about an hour until nightfall, and like an hour and a half before it'd actually be dark, which is when Harmony was talking about. So
He said about 9 p.m.
9 p.m.
That's what I wrote.
Okay. Yeah.
It was
so
12 o'clock and 9 p.m. is when we get in together.
Oh yeah, but then we had jumped forward a couple of hours plus some. So yeah, if there's something you guys are wanting to do, by all means, like what are you interested in doing?
I mean, is there any other places of interest in this monastery?
Above ground, the only other thing that you're really seeing is that there's a little kind of almost like a little port area that's like a dock that's hanging off of the side of one of the kind of ledges. And on this big wooden dock that's been built, there are several. This is kind of the port where these things have been landing and taking off and bringing passengers and all that kind of stuff. Now, as you're looking over and checking these things out, you guys would guess that Ymir, you could actually get into the back of one of them and kind of sit down on your haunches and actually be able to be in there, as long as they could, support your weight. But they look like they actually move some cargo and shit too. Roughly, like they at least carry passengers in their hull and stuff. So you would guess the weight wouldn't be a problem. And all around the area that's displaying this stuff, or that's basically advertising, hey, come take a ride, all that kind of stuff. It says it's the Sky High Airbus company, and Sky High Airbus Tours, it says. And essentially, it says that for 50 credits, you can take an aerial tour, or you can get transport down to the base camp. And so anyway, you would guess that that'd be an area you guys could go take the tour if you wanted to, and get a view of this place from the sky.
Give us
I've got something.
Alright, let's rock it.
Okay,
we'll
cool.
make our way to the port.
All right, so you guys head on over to the port, and as
we're walking, Ymir removes one of the rolled snaggleweed cigarettes that he had in his pack. Since him and a comma are obviously heading, we're just relaxing, kind of R&R right now.
Get out of my head. That's what I was gonna do too. Sky high.
Ymir gingerly pulls out the snaggleweed cigarello from his pack and smiles at Akama.
What? And then I look at Ymir in a shocking manner and looked at him, and then I look at his hand, and I look at him, and then I look at his hand, and I look at him, and I said, bro, that is what I was gonna do. And then I go and reach in my pouch and I pull out one of the snaggleweeds that I got.
Nice. All right, so you guys get You guys get loaded up, and as you guys head on up into the sky, you light up in the back of the vehicle. It is pretty loud. That's the only downside.